Hey guys, my name is Hannah Dareth. I am a 2013 alum of the Westchester Undergraduate Athletic Training Program. When Allison asked me to talk about my experience working as an athletic trainer in Cirque du Soleil, I was really excited because I feel like a lot of people don't really know what we do as athletic trainers. A lot of times they just think that it's working with performing arts and working with a bunch of dancers or theater people. And I've learned that it's a really highly athletic environment, and I think a lot of people miss that when talking about circus. So I'm really excited to talk to you about working in Cirque du Soleil, and hopefully you'll take something from it. So I'll start out talking a little bit about myself, where I came from, what my education background is, and then we'll go into the daily life of Cirque du Soleil and what we do, and hopefully I can answer some of the questions that Allison sent me. So to get started, like I said, I graduated in 2013 with my undergraduate in athletic training from Westchester University. After that, I went and I got my master's degree at Boston University and did a graduate assistantship primarily with their women's lacrosse team. I got my master's degree in health education primarily because it was a degree that I could cater to based on what I wanted to learn, what I wanted to do. So I had about 4 classes that were a requirement for health education, things like pedagogy and teaching in the classroom. And then on top of that, I could take other courses like biomechanics or behavioral health, or other things of that nature that I could really take and learn from to really get a more well-rounded degree, which I really appreciate. So after Boston University, I got a job as an assistant athletic trainer at a small D1 college in Baltimore. So I worked at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, which just beat the #1 seed last year in March Madness, which is amazing. So I worked there for about 2.5 years, or just under 2 years, working as an athletic trainer for their women's basketball team, swim and dive team, and then just helping out with other sort of administrative and insurance stuff. While I was there, a friend of mine had texted me and said, hey, she was working at Cirque du Soleil at the time, and she's like, hey, we're hiring, I think that you should apply. And I grew up as a dancer. I danced for 17 years, so it was always a goal of mine to get back into performing arts and working with them as an athletic trainer. But after working in athletics for a while, I really liked the environment working with college students, so I hadn't really thought much about it. But when she had texted me and said that they were hiring at Cirque du Soleil, I kind of felt like I couldn't pass it up. Came at a really good time where I could move across the country, didn't really have anything holding me down, and it felt like a really good step in my professional career. So she had said, we're hiring, you should apply. So I put in my application and went through a very long, rigorous interview process. Cirque has a way of really vetting their candidates, which is great. So I had a preliminary interview followed by a technical skills interview, and then finally I had a third interview with a bunch of the staff, kind of to gauge your soft skills and make sure that you were a good candidate to work with on a daily basis. So after about 3 months of interviewing, I was offered the position, and I started working with Cirque du Soleil in the summer of 2017. So I've been with them for about 1.5 years now. I work primarily at the Michael Jackson 1 show, which in my opinion is the best. So if you ever have a chance to come out and see it, it's really entertaining and super fun. And I think that as a department, we do a really good job of creating a really fun and innovative environment. So I am constantly growing and challenging myself, and it's a really great environment to develop my skills and learn new stuff, which has been really amazing. So I'll give you a rundown of how Cirque is organized. It's divided up into 2 factions. We have our touring division and a resident division. Touring division is exactly what it sounds like. It's all the shows that travel around the world. There are 2 types of touring shows, big top and arena shows. So big top shows travel to different cities with their own tent. They go and they set it up. They can be in a city for anywhere between 3 weeks and 3 to 6 months. So they set up shop for a little bit longer in each city. Arena shows travel from city to city and set up in actual arenas and stadiums like that. So they'll set up their rigging department, putting up all their aerial stuff in these arenas that are already built. And they have a tendency to stay in each city about 1 to 3 weeks. So they move around a little bit more frequently. Our resident shows are all of the shows that stay in the city that they are built, and they don't travel around. So in Las Vegas, we have 6, soon to be 7 shows. We also have resident shows in Orlando and Disney World. We have a dinner theater in Mexico, one soon to be opening in Hawaii. And then we have 2 new resident shows that will be opening up in Hamburg, Germany, and Hangzhou, China. So those opportunities will be coming up quickly, which will be really, really exciting. I am currently in Las Vegas. I will be there for as long as needed, until touring calls my name and I head off to travel the world on someone else's dime, so that'll be really fun. All of the performance medicine departments, which is the department that I work in, are built the same across Cirque du Soleil. So each department has a head therapist and a therapist. My job title is a therapist. Because I work for an international company and we hire a lot of people from all over the world, they give us a blanket job title as therapist, because we hire anyone from athletic trainers in the States, athletic therapists from Canada, physiotherapists from the UK and Australia, as well as physical therapists from the States and around the world. So I get to work with a really diverse group of staff and a really diverse education background, which is really cool because then you just learn so many different techniques and methods to treating and rehabbing people. And so it's just it's a really great department to work in to really grow your skills and improve. So like I said, my job title is a therapist. In the resident shows in Las Vegas, we also have recently added a new position called a resident therapist. Now it's not technically a residency in the traditional sense. We do look for people with a little bit less experience than we would our therapist and head therapist roles. We're looking for people with a master's degree and 2 years of certified experience. It's kind of a way to introduce people into working with the circus, not necessarily introduce people to working in the profession. So we are looking for very experienced individuals in their field, but it is a good way for people to get their foot in the door and kind of learn how Cirque du Soleil is run. It's a really big corporation, so there are a lot of different nuances that people need to learn, specifically working like with workers' comp and working with international artists and how that affects insurances and working with circus in general. Because when I started, I had no idea the difference between a porter and a flyer when it comes to a banquet act, or learning how to build rehab programs for a trapeze catcher versus a trapeze flyer. So it's a really good way to get your foot in the door and learn how circus is run and what you do with it. It's how I started. I started as a resident therapist, and when a position opened, I was promoted to a therapist about 6 months later. So now I get to work at MJ permanently, which is great. So that's a little bit how Cirque du Soleil is organized. Now I can talk to you a little bit about our daily life. I can speak specifically to the resident show division. Touring shows are a completely different animal, so I can't speak entirely on that one. But if you have any specific questions regarding touring life, I'm happy to answer those. Feel free to email me, and I can answer a little bit more specifically about it. In the resident shows, specifically in Vegas, we have 2 shows a night, 5 days a week. I can tell you my schedule and my daily life over at Michael Jackson 1, but it does vary very slightly from show to show based on their schedule throughout the year. So at MJ, our week runs from Thursday to Monday, and then we get Tuesday, Wednesday off weekly. Sometimes that changes. Every once in a while we'll get a 6-day week where they'll take one of our weekend days and we work 6 days in a row. The artists really don't like that unless they get a bonus. They get a little fatigued from it. And we also get 4 weeks off during the year, which we would consider our darks. So anytime the show is dark, then I am as well. So I only work when the show is running, which is really nice. So we get 4 weeks off during the year. One of our darks is a 2-week dark, and the other 2 are 1 weeks, and they're spread out throughout the year. Which is great vacation time. The only problem is that because you get those 4 weeks, you don't really get any additional time on top of that, unless you were to have a really important reason to take off. You know, my boss in particular is really great about working with me to get time off if I were to have a wedding or a family event that I needed to be a part of. So they're really great about creating that work-life balance and making sure that you're not missing things in life that you really need to be a part of. On top of that, because we work in the performing industry and the entertainment industry, a lot of times we work holidays. So this year I worked on Thanksgiving, and we do have Christmas Day off, but we're going to go right into a 6-day work week right after that. My typical hours are anywhere between 1 and 9:30, or I'll work 3 to 11:30. Like I said, we have 2 shows a night, so we have a show at 7 and a show at 9:30. So we will have somebody come in early and they'll do any treatments and rehabs. We usually start our day with our long-term rehabs or anybody that is out of the show completely. So they'll come in between 1 and 3 typically, and we'll run all of their rehabs, and then they'll go home. And then from about 3 to 6:30 will be anybody else who's in shows and needs treatment beforehand. So people who are coming back from ankle sprains or any sort of like muscle strains, just like the really simple stuff that you're just treating on a weekly basis to prepare them for the show. If anybody needs to modify their show track, as we call it, or what they're doing specifically in the show, they need to modify their track, or if they feel like they can't do the show, they need to come in and see us before 3 o'clock, because at 3:30, stage management creates the lineup for the night. So the show changes on who is doing what throughout the week, changes every night, but the show itself doesn't change unless there's a big change to the act, as if like so-and-so can't do their act tonight, so we have to cut that act, and then the show will be different. But they try to keep the show pretty similar from night to night so the audience gets the same experience. So like I said, I work about 8.5 hours a day, which is totally unheard of in athletic training. Coming from college athletics in a small D1 setting, you're working 60 hours a week, you go weeks without a day off. And then I come here and I'm working 45 hours a week. I get 2 days off in a row every week, and I get regular vacation. I'm like, what am I going to do with all my time? And so you just feel like you have all of this free time to like either pick up a new hobby, or a lot more time to like do a lot more reading and research. So it's been like a really great experience to explore different avenues of my life and really grow in my profession and my career. So as far as work-life balance goes, it's been really phenomenal to work in this setting for sure. So like I said, the schedule varies from show to show. It just depends on their treatment load and how many people are working that day. But for the most part, at Michael Jackson 1, we try to keep our 1 to 9:30 and 3 to 11:30. So we have one person that comes in early and covers the first show, and then covers treatments in between shows. We have about an hour in between shows to work on any injuries that might have happened during the show, or just to catch up on any sort of treatments that people missed during the week. And then the other person will come in late and then cover first and second show and take care of any injuries that might happen during second show afterward. So that's about our daily schedule. As far as, I think somebody asked about our salary. So we have the range for salary at Cirque du Soleil. The starting figure is $50,000, and it can go up to nearing 6 figures based on your experience and education and certification background. So that really just varies, but it's significantly higher than you'll see at a lot of other environments, which is another drawing factor to me taking the job. So like I said, our daily life, we like to start with our rehabs for people who are out completely and aren't in the show. So they'll come in and we get to spend like a significant amount of time with them one-on-one, and that'll freeze up the rest of the afternoon for people who come in later for the show. The schedule during the week changes based on what the show needs. Typically at the beginning of the week on Thursday, we start with all of our trainings for all of our high-risk acts. So we usually, in our show, we have a trampoline act, so we'll have a trampoline training, and we have a slackline act, so we'll also have slackline on Thursdays, as well as our tumbling act and our rotating aerial bungee act. So they try to get those trainings in right away on Thursday so that they can come off the weekend and train for the week and then be set And then the rest of the week will be scheduled based on what the needs are. So if we have a new artist that's coming in, they need to reintegrate into the show. So they'll need to learn the spacing and the traffic patterns of each number, and so they'll have rehearsals for that to put them into the number and have them cleared for the stage. Because different parts of the stage will move. There might be like a hole in the middle of the stage at one point, so you need to learn how to maneuver around that to reduce the risk of falling. So as far as preparing for the show, the artists really do that on their own. So it's based on what they feel like they need. And since we have such a diverse group of athletes, we have a rope artist, we have trampolinists, we have slackliners, we've got acrobats, we've got dancers. They all will do their warm-up on their own. We're working on helping them warm up better because a lot of them do not warm up properly. So we're really working on that right now. But for the most part, we just make ourselves available to what they need. And a lot of times it's just them warming up their act or warming up and stretching and doing whatever they need to feel prepared and ready for it. Like I said, a lot of people are not quite warming up properly, and that's really because we have a group of our group of artists come from a lot of diverse backgrounds. We have people who've been training their whole life in trampoline or in tumbling, and they've been doing this since they were kids. We also have dancers that are coming from a totally untrained background. These are people that are street dancers, and they have no formal training, and they've just been doing this their whole life, and now they've gotten this job on a show where they have to perform a show 10 times a week. And so that's a much higher load than they're used to, and so they kind of have to learn how to take care of their bodies and train and condition and warm up in order to do that. I would say that's been like the biggest challenge working with circus, is that every day is game day, 2 times a day. So it's not that we're just preparing all week for one time that we have to do really well. All of these artists have to perform on their A game 2 times a night, 5 days a week. And so that load can be a lot, and it really does change what your rehab is, because you need to monitor your workload, particularly with tendinopathies or more muscle-based injuries. You really got to be cognizant of your workload. And so a lot of times that can be anywhere between, okay, we're not going to do rehab today because we'd like to get you into shows, or like, hey, let's modify your show today so that we can actually do some rehab. And it's just a matter of like balancing that. And for the most part, our artistic director and stage management are really, really great about working with that, because their eye is on the longevity of the artist, not necessarily the immediacy, unless for some reason we're really short on artists that day. So it's been really helpful to work with them. There's really no pressure to like get anybody back immediately, because we have somebody to cover their act. While working in athletics, if you've got a big game and your star player's out, you got to do everything you can to make sure that they get back into the game. While here, you get a little bit more flexibility to really take your time and make sure that when you put them back into the show, they're going to be back in the show forever. It's not a matter of like putting them back in and then they're coming back out, and then it's a little back and forth. The artistic team really prefers that, take your time, do it right, get them back into the show when you can, and we'll make it work, which is great. So that has been, that was probably the biggest adjustment, but also the artistic team has really made it easy for us, which is nice. So during the day, we'll do all of our treatments and rehabs, and then, like I said, we have a show at 7, we have a show at 8:30, or 9:30, sorry. We cover all of our high-risk acts, so that's anything that would potentially result in a really bad injury. So at our show, we cover our Russian swing act. It's where on a big platform, and they shoot a person up into the air, and they tumble and they fall into a net. We also cover our aerial rotating bungee act. It's when a couple of guys are hooked into harnesses and then attached to bungees, and then they rotate around a bar on these bungees, which sounds really confusing, but I'll hopefully send some videos over and you can kind of get an idea of what we do. And then we cover our aerial rope act, which is exactly what it sounds. It's a guy that climbs on a rope and does a bunch of like turns and flips, and he's not harnessed into anything. He's just holding onto the rope with his own strength. And then we also cover our trampoline act. We have this really massive trampoline set with up to 9 guys that are like jumping on it and jumping from like 18 feet. It's really crazy. So we also cover that one. So for all of our high risk acts, we cover from stage side. So I always try to be at least on stage level. For the most part, I try to be in the wings, which means just off of the stage that the audience can see. So I always try to be pretty close, and then you watch the act and make sure that everyone's doing everything they need to be safe, and checking for any sort of, the same thing that you would do if you're covering a game or a practice. Making sure, if somebody kind of falls funny, you watch them get up and make sure that the gait is normal and they're, performing like they normally do. And then if anybody were to get hurt, checking in with them afterward. And going from there. Otherwise, we're in our office, which is on the floor below our stage level. And during the show, we're mainly just catching up on our paperwork. Really, because we work with workers' comp, our documentation has to be very detailed and thorough. So it does require a little bit more paperwork, which is not my favorite, but it's definitely gotten me in the habit of documenting a lot more specifically and frequently. So during the show, we're catching up on paperwork, or if anybody were to get hurt during the show, then we would do any sort of treatments. But as far as regular treatments go, we don't do it during the show so that we're available should anybody get hurt. Sometimes we'll get called, so we all have a radio, and they'll call us to stage level or call us to the dressing room if someone's bleeding or if someone got hurt. If someone were to get hurt during the show, we have to make a pretty quick decision because if they need to be out of an act or out of the rest of the show, then they need to be able to replace that person immediately. So for the most part, if it's an acrobat in a big number or a dancer in a big number, sometimes they can just cut the position or rotate a couple of the artists to fill in for that position because they all know different positions so that they can rotate like that. We do have a couple of acts that are a couple of characters that are solo characters that can't be replaced on the fly. We did have somebody who was one of our main characters that started, and about halfway through he sprained his ankle and wasn't able to continue the show, so they needed to put in his backup immediately. So makeup, hair, wardrobe, they all quickly got this other person out of their previous costume and makeup that they were in and put him into the new costume and makeup. So we started the show with one character and finished with another, which was pretty cool to see. Everybody work so quickly like that, being able to just like grab it from another act and put him right in. So that was pretty neat to see. Working in live theater, you really gotta fly by the seat of your pants and do your best and do everything you can to make the show as consistent and enjoyable for the audience, because that's what they're there for. So that was pretty cool to see. I definitely think one of my favorite things about working in circus is being able to work with so many different departments. You're working, if somebody has an eye infection or a skin condition, we call our makeup team and we say, hey, so-and-so can't wear their makeup today, or so-and-so needs to do part of their makeup today, or how can we adjust this? Or, we have a guitarist in the act, and she's not used to using such heavy guitars. Our guitars are much heavier than the ones she's used to using. And she has this really big costume and this really big wig, and it's got these like shoulder pads and a cape, and the wig is huge, and it's just like it's a lot more material than she's used to wearing. So when she started using it, started wearing it all the time, she started to develop all of this neck pain. And so a combination of making her stronger and building up her tolerance to that, we also had to work with the wardrobe department to modify the costume and make it more comfortable for her. So that's been really fun to work with. On top of working with wardrobe and makeup, we also work very closely with our carpentry and rigging teams, specifically with our rescues. So about once a month we practice one of our rescues. We have a handful of them, so we do a rescue for trampoline, for Russian swing when they swing into the net, our aerial rescues, and I'm missing one. And we also do a rescue for rescuing people out of the hole that we have in the stage that lifts. So we have a couple of holes that the stage will drop down and then there's a hole in stage. And so rescuing somebody from that. So we have a handful of people from our carpentry department, props department, rigging, and lighting that are trained in emergency care and rescue. So everyone takes the ECCR and is certified in CPR and AED. So now we have this big rescue team that we will use should somebody need rescued on stage. So like I said, we practice this about once a month. We change the rescue that we do so that we're constantly rotating, constantly practicing. And because it is such a high risk, we take our emergency care really, really seriously. And we make sure that everybody is very highly trained and very high qualified. But we do really take an opportunity to make sure that they are skilled in that, looking through their splints and their oxygen, and just to like practice these really weird rescues. You know, we try to put artists in like super strange situations. You know, there's a point where we have artists flying over the audience, and so we practice what would happen if they were to drop onto a patron. So practicing rescuing someone from the seats, which is really difficult. Or practicing, you know, someone having an arm looped into a ladder that's on stage. And so we try to make these as difficult as possible just so we can kind of workshop it and be prepared for a worst case scenario. It is pretty cool because for a couple of our rescues, we either have to fly up onto the top trampoline or we get to wear a harness and we get lowered into like the hole in the stage. Which is really fun. So you get to do like all these really cool things where you're kind of like flying all over the theater, which is not something that you get to do on a lacrosse field. So like I said, for our trampoline rescue, the way that our set is built, we have 3 trampolines on the stage and then a center trampoline at the very top. It's 18 feet. So should one of the artists get hurt and they're the only artist at the top of the trampoline, they would fly one of our PMed team up to the top of the trampoline to take C-spine stabilization, and then they would lower the trampoline down to stage level, and then we would continue the rescue from there. Now, once you do that, you're on an unstable surface, so you can't just have people walking all over the trampoline and having the artists move all over the place. So we have these boards that we would set up so that our EAP team can walk on the boards and help put the person on a spine board, and then we would continue the rescue and take them out to meet the ambulance. So it's just kind of a lot of like little nuancy things like that we have to do to make sure that the artist is as safe and stable as possible in rescuing. Other shows have really weird rescues. Over at O, they have water, so then they work with their aquatic department and teaching them how to take C-spine and putting them on a spine board in the water, so that's like really interesting. So it's just each show has their own little quirks that you have to develop this big rescue that in a really weird surface or in a corner of something or in a weird apparatus. Zumanity has a big water bowl, so you got to practice how to get somebody on a spine board when they're in a big water bowl. So that's been really fun. You're able to be a little bit creative with this stuff, and it really stretches your ability to do these kinds of things and really challenges you. And you really learn that you just do your best. If you can keep the artist as safe as possible and as stable as possible, then it's successful. So somebody had asked if I have had to do a rescue before. Fortunately, I've only had to do one rescue on stage, and it was for an ankle sprain. Which to this day we give this guy a really hard time for because we stopped the show for him. It was during our trampoline act, and at the end of the act, this guy falls. He jumps from the top of our tower, which has got to be 25 feet, I'm sure. So he jumps for the top, lands on the trampoline, and then he lands inside the tower. And he kind of landed funny. I had seen him do it before, and this is one of our artists that is really, really skilled. He's 40 years old. He's been doing this for years, and he's always like a cat, where he has these really weird falls, and then he just walks away from it because he's very good at falling, which is good. So he kind of landed funny, and I had seen him and kind of kept an eye on him, and then all of a sudden stage management had called me over to stage right because this guy couldn't come out of the tower. So at that point, they decided to stop the show. We have this video that they'll pop up, that'll pop up for the audience to watch while we're finishing, while we're finishing up the rescue. So because he's in the tower, I had to climb to the top of the tower, there's ladders. And when I got there, 2 of our carpentry members had already been up there to make sure that the artist was breathing and kind of give an idea of what kind of rescue we needed to do. So they had already communicated that to stage management. They said, so-and-so hurt his ankle, he can't come down the stairs, you need to go up and help him. So I get up there and I see him and he's laughing because he's like, I can't believe the show is stopping because I rolled my ankle. I just can't put weight on it. So we were all giving him a hard time. And once we realized he was safe, we decided to lower the tower to stage level so that he could just walk off the tower, and then we could take him down to our athletic training room to take a look at him. So they pushed the tower onto our lift, and the lift lowered all the way down so that he could just walk off the tower onto the stage. And then at that point, everything is out of my hands, and it's up to the rest of the stage hands and tech crew to get the show back up and running at the next number. And everyone moves very quickly. They know exactly where they need to be, what they need to be doing. It is a very, very well-oiled machine when it comes to this kind of stuff. So fortunately, it was a very non-life-threatening rescue, super easy, but it did require us to stop the show, and we did have to make some adjustments for that. And so he was out of the show for the rest of first show and for second show, so they had to adjust the lineup based on that. And that was my first rescue, and hopefully we don't really have much else after that. So hopefully I can answer a couple more of your questions. I had a question about which domain I feel I spend most of my time. So I think primarily I spend my day doing treatments and rehabs. Because we work with artists, a lot of them are very in tune to their body. So if something goes mildly wrong, they know it. And so they're going to come in and they're going to ask for, hey, can you check this out? This doesn't feel right. So a lot of times we're just kind of dealing with a little bit of aches and pains. We're also working with a very diverse age group. So we have 63 artists in the show, 75 if you include on-call artists. And they range from ages 19 to 43 is, I think, our oldest dancer. So you're dealing with a really large population of ages here, which can make treatments a little bit difficult. I think the most challenging injury I've had to deal with is a total hip replacement. And she's a dancer, and she's trying to get back to dancing, which is totally unheard of. You don't replace a hip and then go back to kicking your foot up to your head. But we've been able to work with a surgeon who is doing a new technique where you have a dual movement hip. And so they're able to put in a different, totally losing the word on that, put in a different replacement so that her hip gets more range of motion than you would with a normal total hip replacement. So she is about 2 months out now and doing really, really well. We've gotten a lot of her motion back and just improving her strength right now. And it's really going to be a slow progression to get her back into dancing because it's such a delicate situation. We really want to make sure that we put her back in safely and reduce the risk of dislocation. And also just returning her back to the career that she wasn't really planning on finishing for the next couple of years. So once we finish that up, I'll let you know how it goes. But so far, so good. Our most common injuries, it really varies. For the most part, we'll get a lot of back injuries, ankle sprains, shoulder injuries. It depends on the discipline, depends on how long it's been since we've had a break. I've really noticed that it's the same thing in athletics where you get these cycles of injuries. 1 year you may have a lot of ACL tears, or 1 year you may have a lot of ankle sprains. So it really just depends. It really varies. We don't see anything too different or interesting than you would in a traditional setting. I will always say that the human body doesn't change when you go to circus. It just moves a little differently. So, I mean, I'm treating people the same way. I just get a little bit more creative with my rehab. The range of motion is a little bit different. The way that they move on stage is a little bit different than you would, say, working with a football player or a basketball player. But for the most part, you're working with the same body. You know, the structures don't change. You just look at it a little bit differently. So in that sense, it was a pretty easy adjustment into training and rehab. And it's kind of fun to be a little bit more creative working with dancers or trampolinists. You get to do a little bit more interesting rehab exercises than the simple ones that you're used to. But they're also, you know, tried and true. You know, you got your glute bridges and your lateral band walks, and you do this all the time, and they work just as well on acrobats than they do basketball players. So that was a pretty easy transition. I think somebody had asked if we had a lot of burn injuries, which I thought was a really interesting question. At MJ, we have a couple of pyro effects, but we don't really run into any burn injuries. Over at O, they actually have a guy that puts on a suit and sets himself on fire, which is crazy. So they do have like a rescue for him and all of these procedures for treating him, but because he's been doing it for so long, he doesn't really get a lot of burn injuries, and the suit that he wears is really safe and keeps him safe, so he doesn't really they don't really have to deal with a ton of burn injuries for him. I'm also pretty sure he's the only guy in the world that does that act and refuses to tell anybody else about it because it's so unique, which I think is pretty cool. We do have a new show coming to Vegas that's going to have a lot of stunting and parkour and BMX, and it's just going to be a really aggressive show, and I think there will be some fire effects in that. So our team has actually been looking at what kinds of things can we get to prepare for burn injuries and all of these like weird things that might be happening with such like a high octane kind of show. So that's definitely on our radar and something that we're going to prepare for. I'm not really sure what the show is going to end up looking like, but it's something that we need to be aware of. Let's see. I think my favorite thing about working with Circus, is the fact that we get to work with such an international population. On my show, like I said, we have 75 people, and I think maybe 25 of them are from the States, and the other 75% are from all over the world. We have Russians, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, French, Brazilian. I'm gonna miss some. So we've got people from all over the world, which is amazing because you get to work with such unique and diverse people. The language barrier can be a little tricky, but you get really good at figuring out which words are understandable, and then you just shorten everything down, and you end up talking in very like short sentences. So it makes for a really good challenge when you're treating and rehabbing, and you're trying to evaluate this person, but they don't speak your language, and you don't speak their language, and you're just trying to communicate through hand gestures. But it's really fun because you get to develop these really great relationships even though you don't have the same language and you don't have the same background. And so it's been really cool to be able to build these relationships and work with these people who come from all over the world. And it just gives you a bigger perspective on the profession and a bigger perspective on circus and what you're working with. And it's been really fun. Let's see if I've missed anything. I had a couple of questions about what if is this something that I've always wanted to do, and if I were to be offered a job tomorrow, in what setting would that be? I would say I have wanted to get into this job. As a dancer, I did want to get back into performing arts. Like I said before, I kind of forgot about it. Working in athletics, it wasn't really something that I was particularly striving for, but if it had come up, I would definitely look into it, and it did, and so here we are. But working here, and I would 100% say that this is my dream job. I started here, and it's the most fun thing that I've ever done. I get to work with people that play all day. You know, you're watching these guys pull these ridiculous tricks on a trampoline or on the slack line, and you're just in awe that people can move this way so casually. Like, this is what they do for their job. So I'm incredibly lucky to be able to work with people that do just get to have fun all day. And because of that, I get to have fun, and I get to, rehab is more exciting because I'm really getting them back to what they really love to do, what they've built their life to do. And so that's been really fun. And the work-life balance is a totally added bonus. I would absolutely say this is definitely my dream job. It would be really, really hard to go back to a college athletic setting, just because I think burnout is so quick, and it's so easy, and it happens a lot. So it would be really hard to leave such a diverse, exciting, fun environment where I get to do what I love, for people that love to do what they do. So on top of that, if you are trying to get into Cirque du Soleil specifically, number one, make connections. I am happy to answer any questions or be available to you guys should you need it. I'll make sure Allison gives you my email. That's really how I got into working with Cirque. On top of that, at Cirque, we really look for diverse experiences. It does make us pause sometime when someone is only experienced in performing arts. It is an added bonus simply because you have a little bit more knowledge in the entertainment world. But it's not what we look for. I didn't have any performing arts experience as an athletic trainer prior to working with Cirque, and many, if not all, of my colleagues were the same way. They kind of come into Cirque working with professional football teams, professional hockey teams, college athletics. They come from all different kinds of backgrounds. And their first performing arts experience was with Cirque. So my second piece of advice would be to get a very diverse resume. Work with as many sports as you can, work with as many settings as you can, just because it's going to give you a bigger range of skills. You're going to be able to cater your rehabs and treatments to different types of athletes and understand better the way people move in different ways. So not only for your profession, get a more diverse experience. Don't be afraid to move from job to job or change it up because you've been doing the same thing for too long. It will only make you better. I think the last question that I have to answer is, what is the most important part of my job? First and foremost, it should be the same answer across the board. My most important part of my job is to keep people safe. Keep people safe, keep people safe, keep people healthy. That's why I'm there. And it should be like that no matter what setting you're working in. That should be your number one goal. Second of all, I would probably say that making artists feel like they're taken care of is probably the next most important. Working with performers and artists is a very unique group of people. They have a tendency to be kind of needy and really feel like they're being feeling like they're the priority when it comes to the show. For the most part, they really are. I mean, they're the reasons we have a show. They wouldn't be able to put on a show without them. But I do. Secondly, I think the second most important part of my job is to make artists feel like they're being taken care of. I think for the most part, the second most important part of my job is to make sure artists feel taken care of. Moving to a performing arts setting, you're dealing with a lot more people who won't just push through injuries quite as often as a traditional athlete would. So it's really pushed my skills in the sense that I have to be a little bit more empathetic and a little bit more conscious of making them feel like they are being taken care of. And a lot of times that comes from an education background. I have really taken the time to explain what I'm doing, what I have found in my evaluation, how I'm going to treat it, how this is going to make them better. I've learned that a lot of times that's all they need. They just want to know why we're doing things. Make sure that I'm not just doing things for the sake of doing them. So it's really changed the way that I evaluate and treat people, I'm a lot more specific in my evaluation in the sense that I explain what I'm doing, how I'm what I've found, and then what I'm going to do to treat or fix it. And they feel a lot more comforted by that, and they feel a lot more reassured that, like, okay, I'm not just doing this for the sake of doing it. They know exactly what's wrong with me. They're going to do what they can to take care of it. And then they're a lot more motivated to do those things, which has been really, really great. So I think that's about it. I hope that I answered all of your questions. If anything else comes up, if you have any other questions that you'd like answered, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer any of them. Like I said, I'll make sure that Allison gives you my email. So feel free to contact me. That's not a problem at all. It's been great talking with you guys. Thanks for bearing with me in getting through this. And hopefully one day we'll be seeing you at our performance medicine department. We'd love to have you. Thanks.